All right, good afternoon, guys. Starting the second part of chapter 13 that I want us to go over. So, if you can open up your PowerPoint slides to chapter 13, I want to go back over stock dividends. Right now, as I'm talking to you, I have your stock splits lecture video uploading. So, that'll be up here shortly. And I plan on getting your stock dividends up there. And then I plan on doing another video with some actual problems that I'll walk through with you. We'll do it together. I'm giving you stupid pictures. This picture that you're looking at is the view out of my bedroom window to my front lawn, which, as you can see, it's a pretty clear day. It's not raining. I still think I'm in New York, considering the howling winds up here at the top of the hill. The last 2 nights, I swear I was going to end up in Kansas like Dorothy. But with that being said, let's get moving. So by now you should have your stock dividend slides open. That's chapter 13 PowerPoints. And I want you to first go to the first slide in the selection there. I want to talk about the stock dividend. Now, one of your questions that will be asked of you and so on and so forth is, why does a company give a stock dividend? Why does a company even think about it? Why not just pay cash and be done with it? Well, there's several different reasons why, and they're listed there, as you can see from the slide, and we'll talk about a few of them. The first one that we see, well, let's talk about what a stock dividend is first. In chapter 11, we did a cash dividend. And if you remember back to that, there was 3 key dates that were associated with dividends. So I will go over them quickly just to give you a refresher since it's been a little while. The first date is what we call our declaration date. That's the date that the company declares. And if you remember, the board of directors is the one who declares that there will be a dividend paid to the shareholders of the corporation. The second date is your record date. And that's the date that you must own the stock by to actually be in receipt of the dividend payment. And the last date is what we called our payment date. Now, if you keep in mind, all 3 of those dates are exactly, they're discussed in the press release of the dividend release. Whether you're doing a cash dividend or the one that we're going to be working on here, which is our stock dividend, no matter what, those 3 dates are associated throughout. Whether it's a cash or a stock dividend, you will still have a declaration date, you will still have a record date, and you will still have a payment date. So whether it's a cash or stock dividend, you're going to have those 3 dates. So you got to keep that in mind. Really, the only difference is some of the accounts that you're going to use to prepare a stock dividend. Now, a stock dividend is slightly different than cash dividend because it's not as easy. The concept is there, but it's just not as easy as a cash dividend where you take the number of outstanding shares multiplied by the dividend per share to get your dividends payable. Here we have an extra step, and we are going to be having to use a percentage that would be given to you in each problem. So with that in mind, we're going to talk through the slides first. So you'll have a short little video to go over your slides. And then we'll do like we just did in class. So I will put up a problem, and I will put the problem up here. I will record myself doing it, and I'll write it out for you and give you an idea what it's supposed to look like. After that, I will go ahead and I'll be putting up the PowerPoints so that are not PowerPoints. I'll be putting up a Word document with questions for you guys to answer. And once you get those answers, there'll be a small little short quiz. And again, we spoke about the quizzes. I'm not worried about them. I'm not worried about the grades. I'm more worried about you doing them. I want to see the initiative of you putting the time and effort in to getting things done. Okay? All right. I think my cat's going to fall off the window here. He's looking at a bird outside, and he's about to tear down the shade. All right. Stitch, go sit down. All right, so a stock dividend is the proportional distribution of additional shares. All that means is that they're going to be giving you shares of stock instead of cash. That's all that simply means. Okay, so instead of being paid a cash dividend, you're going to be paid in shares of stock. What you do with that stock afterwards is completely up to you. You can hold on to it. You could sell it. You can use it for toilet paper for all I care. All right. The key here is that you are going to be paid in stock. You're going to be given stock. Now, again, if you know anything about the stock market, the way you make money in the stock market is to buy low, sell high, which right now is a great time to buy low. And then the second thing is through dividends. Best way to do dividends is just reinvest them. So there's your little stock tip of the day. So for instance, they're going to be giving you shares of stock. Now, the biggest reason is, why does a company go ahead and do that? Why would a company give out shares of stock to people instead of just giving them cash? Well, the first reason is quite obvious. They may need to hold on to cash. They may need to have a lawsuit coming up that they may need to pay for, or something along those lines. So the company may decide, instead of giving their shareholders cash, that they'll give them extra shares of stock. Again, those shares of stock, you can turn around and sell them, transfer them. You can do a lot of things with those shares of stock to make money. So just because you're not given cash in hand doesn't mean that it doesn't have a cash value. All right. The next thing that a stock dividend does is it lowers the actual stock price, or the market price of the stock. And that's just simple supply and demand. As more shares are available, people are willing to pay less. Okay, if there was less shares, then they want to pay more. So if there's more shares of stock out there in the open as outstanding shares of stock, chances are the price of these shares will go down. So that's another thing that tends to happen and is a characteristic of stock dividends. The next item is it allows for a non-taxable distribution. Those are always nice for companies because they are always complaining that they're being taxed to the hilt and that they can't afford to pay taxes and things like that. And why a lot of the major companies, including some of the ones that we here in the United States invest in, have, companies that are not located here in the U.S. They may have an office here in the U.S., but they may keep money elsewhere. Why? Because the amount of taxes that they'd pay to bring the money back to the United States is tremendous. So there are some things of nature that's good for them, in this case, the non-taxable distribution. The other thing that in this big, long 3 sentences that you see here, it increases the company's permanent capital structure by transferring portions in the retained earnings to contributed capital. All that means is that they're increasing their equity in the company. Their contributed capital, which is your common stock, is going up. And instead of it being located in the retained earnings account, it's just going to be shown as contributed capital. That's not a real important thing for most of you guys to pay attention to. The main thing I want to get through with you in this stock split, or the stock dividend slide that you have, which is the first slide of chapter 13, is I do want you to know at least 2 reasons why a company would give a stock dividend. Whatever those 2 reasons are, it's real easy. You could pick it conserves cash and it's a non-taxable distribution. Certain keywords always stick out in people's heads, like non-taxable is something that always would stick out in my head. Anytime you have the ability to buy something and not pay taxes on it, that's great. So that's one reason that always sticks out in my head whenever I think about a stock dividend is, hey, it's a non-cash distribution for the company. That's a good thing. The more money that they save, the more money they have the ability to distribute to their shareholders. And as a shareholder, you guys all know, the more money they distribute to you, the more money you make, the happier we all are. All right. So that's the first part of this lecture, going over the first slide and just explaining what's on there. Now, if you flip down to your second slide, the second slide is important because I really want you to pay attention to what this slide has to say. These are the journal entries, and notice these are the journal entries for your stock dividends. Okay, these are slightly different than your cash dividends. They are different, so you do need to pay attention to this. All right. So the first one, you can see, again, I went over the 3 key dates that are associated with a dividend. You've got your declaration, you've got your record, and you have your payment date. Now I'm going to go over the easiest one first, which is going to be your record date. Guess what? All you got to write is no entry. The same way you wrote no entry before is the same way you're going to write no entry now. Okay? There is no entry for the record date. That is simply an informational date for the company to know who to pay their dividend to. Whatever dividend they're paying, whether it be a cash dividend, whether it be a special dividend, whether it be a stock dividend, the record date will always be a no entry date. Again, that's just strictly informational. The other key that I want to point out to you in this whole situation is once you find the first credit, which is your common stock distributable, okay? Once you find common stock distributable, that number will be the number you plug into your payment date entry. Okay? So you could see common stock distributable as a credit under the declaration date. And then under your payment date, it is a debit. That is going to have the same number. So when you figure it out for common stock distributable under declaration, that same number that you put up there is going to be the number that you bring down to your payment date. And then your credit for your payment date will be common stock, and it will be that same amount also. So once you do all the calculations for the declaration date, the payment date should be easy. Okay? With the payment date, you just mainly have to remember what the accounts are that's associated with the stock dividend. Now, the stock dividend, you can see, has different account names there. So let's now go into the declaration date entry, and we'll talk about this. And once I get done talking about this, I'll shut it off. I'll upload this video, and then I will go ahead and work on a problem that will be on Vanco for you. I'll work it out on paper and show you. And then what we'll do is I will set up 2 other questions for you to go ahead and follow and do those same things. All right. So excuse me. All right. Declaration date. Now, just like you did with a cash dividend, you are going to be paying them a dividend. So in this case, our first part of our declaration date is going to be a debit to an account called stock dividend. Now, what you need to figure out the amount of the stock dividend is the information that's in the parentheses listed right after it. Now, I did tell you that there is a little bit of a typo, that there should be an extra set of parentheses inside here. It's not there. It should be. So just hang on with me and listen to what I'm going to say. This is important because if you don't listen to this part, you're not going to get the correct answers here. So the first thing you need to do, cat took off. First thing you need to do is you need to take the shares that are outstanding, which would be given to you. Okay, if it is not, look back in your notes and remember that we have something called a tree diagram. Okay, we have a tree diagram to try and explain to you how to figure out what the outstanding shares are. If you need a little refresher, I will put a picture of that tree diagram up when we start our first problem. But just as a quick reminder, it starts with authorized. They break down into 2 categories, which is issued and unissued. And then your issued category breaks down into outstanding shares and treasury shares. So if you don't quite remember that, take a look back when we figured that out in chapter 11 and see what you come up to there. So you're going to find the number of outstanding shares, and then you're going to multiply that by a percentage. That percentage multiplied by the outstanding shares will give you a number. That number, I want you to stop there and label. That is the number of new shares that you're going to issue. That is not the value. Okay, that's not the value of the shares. That's just how many shares you're going to give out. It's a very big key point of interest there. Make sure that you pay attention to the fact that this is the number of new shares being issued, not the value, just the number. So once you've got that number, that's when you're going to do the second part of the calculation, which is to take the number of new shares, which you just found out, and multiply that by the market price. Okay? Multiply the number of new shares by the market price. That will give you the amount for your stock dividends. That will be your debit. Okay? That will be your debit for your stock dividend account. Now, the next thing you're going to do is you're going to move down to the next line, which is going to be your first credit. And your first credit account that you're going to use is going to be called common stock distributable. Now, the word distributable is, in essence, telling you you're going to have to do something. Okay? You owe somebody something that you need to give them. In this case, you're giving them common stock. So hence the reason why we have a common stock distributable account. That is our new liability account, the liability that we are setting up to tell our shareholders that we owe them money. So common stock distributable is a credit. Now, the way you go about figuring out the amount for this account is you're going to go back up to the first one, and you're going to find the number of new shares. Now, this is key why I told you to write that number down and mark it. Okay? You're going to take the number of new shares that you found up under stock dividends, the first part of the stock dividend calculation. You're going to take the number of new shares and you're going to multiply it by the par value. Okay? You're going to multiply it by the par value. Whatever that number comes out to be, that will be your credit for common stock distributable. Does everybody understand that? That's going to be the number of new shares, not outstanding shares, the number of new shares. You already found it when you were figuring out your debit for stock dividends. So you're going to take the number of new shares and you're going to multiply by the par value. Once you get that number, you're going to insert that on your credit entry. Which then leads us to the last part of the stock dividend, which is pretty easy because you're going to have, obviously, if your market price and your par value are different, you're going to have a difference in numbers there. So the difference that you're going to have is what's going to go into the account called the additional paid-in capital, or APIC account. Okay? And all you need to do to balance that is just subtract them. So for instance, let's say that your stock dividend account had 100,000 and your common stock distributable was 75. That would mean your additional paid-in capital would be worth 25. Okay? That's all you have to do to figure out your additional paid-in capital. As you see from the parentheses that is written there, it says amount needed to balance. So all you need to do is just make sure that your debits equal your credits, your left equals your right, and so on and so forth. Okay? So the additional paid-in capital amount is a very easy number to come and get. It's not a hard number. Again, if you follow along your slides and you read what the slides actually say, a lot of this will become a lot easier for a lot of you. I know from personal experience taking online courses, it's not fun. There's a heck of a lot of work that's associated with it, but unfortunately, due to what's going on, this is what we need to do. So please keep that in mind. Excuse me. So now that you got your declaration date done, again, we know the record date is real easy because that's a no entry. That's pretty simple to understand, same way it was with a cash dividend, which then brings us down to our payment date. Our payment date is where we get rid of the liability. And I told you just before that our liability account that we set up is called common stock distributable. So to get rid of a liability, you do a debit. Keep in mind your rules, ADE and LSR. Liabilities go up with a credit, they go down with a debit. So we're going to debit our common stock distributable account, and we are going to credit just our plain old common stock account. Now, as I discussed earlier, the amount that you're going to plug in there is the same amount that you found it to be under your declaration entry. So if you look up to your declaration date, and if your common stock distributable was 75,000, that is the number that you're going to bring down and plug into your payment date. There's no new calculations needed. It's just grab it and go. Okay. Now, I hope that these two videos for chapter 13 for the stock dividend and the stock split are going to help us out with that. What I'm going to do, I'm going to end this video here, get it uploaded. And while it's uploading, I'm going to work on a couple problems, and I will bring them to you via the video chat here again also, so that we can continue moving forward and continue to put ourselves closer to the end of this semester and the end of this pandemic that we are all dealing with. Okay? So look for the next video. Look for the next homework assignment. Again, please keep in touch with emails, whatever we need, and let's get this done. All right. Bye-bye.